welcome to the Futureprint podcast. For our next edition, we are joined by a gentleman by the name of Patrick Potvin. I'm not sure if I pronounced that properly, but I'm sure he can say yay or nay or do it correctly at some point. Patrick joins us from a business called Mondelez, and we're going to talk a lot later on about packaging and the big trends and what Mondelez do and what Patrick's specific role is. Welcome, first of all, Patrick.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And it is indeed Patrick Potvin. It is not an easy name. It is originally French, but I'm Flemish from Belgium, but I'm living in England. So.
Yeah. How long have you lived in England? Have you been
over 20 years now. So I came over end 99, and I'm living in the Peak District. So as I mentioned, I'm originally Belgium, and Belgium is divided in two areas. The north is the beer drinking part, and the south is the wine drinking part. They are the Walloons of the French speaking, and I'm from the Flemish speaking part. But I'm here now in the Peak District for over 20 years.
Brilliant. It's a beautiful, for anybody that isn't UK based, Peak District is one of the most beautiful parts of the country, I think.
It is paradise indeed, yeah. It's like being in Barbados every day except sun.
Yeah, without maybe the temperature.
Yeah, exactly, and the palm trees.
Yeah. Okay, well, brilliant. So we've got a little bit of your backstory already. I've never heard Belgium explained like that, but I'm going to remember that. North beer, South wine. That's very good. Tell us a bit about your background, because you're obviously involved with one of the biggest packaging entities in the world, but your background, you're a scientist, are you, originally?
Yeah. So I'm originally a chemist, but my late wife always laughed with me because I have quite a bit of qualifications, and it's not to sum up. In fact, it's just because I was bored and I did quite a bit of study. So I'm a background chemist, but I did as well an MSc in total quality control. I have a packaging degree, but I did as well for my hobby, in fact, the meteorology. So I do weather forecasting if you want me to, and I have as well solar physics. I have the degree, and cooking and whatever. But my wife always said like those. Qualifications are toilet paper because I never used it. I've, for instance, a degree in navigation, but that is more from the calculation point of view, and because I get lost everywhere. So. Basically, it's just for fun that I'm doing it because I'm nosy and curious to learn. But I never worked as a chemist. But I started in the end 70s with Estée Lauder in the quality department, which was quite interesting. And that was my first job. In fact, after I left, in fact, the studies, the school, universities, etc., and in quality. And that's where I learned to work with packaging as well, interaction or compatibility of cosmetics, personal care, fragrances, etc. And that was quite interesting, and that's how I ended up as well in packaging. Started up a packaging lab there in Belgium at that time, and I was 18 years with Estée Lauder, so it was quite a long time. Ended up as well with the certification, looking at suppliers, packaging suppliers, doing their self certification. So I did as well then the auditing qualification in the auditing. Later on, it was as well the ethical auditing as well, which I did then with Marks and Spencer. So, but after 18 years, I thought like, well, I have to move on. Not that I'm loyal or so, but I was not married with the company, and I wanted to do something else. And I went that time to Nestle, and Nestle, that was in the chilled dairy where I've worked for 2 years. And it's only 2 years because they closed the factory where I was based in Belgium, and they offered me that time a job or in France or in Holland. And that time I didn't want to move immediately. I was dating that time my British, afterwards my wife, and I didn't want to go to France or to Holland Holland, so it was more I would like to move or stay in Belgium or move to England. And we were commuting already for a couple of years, Belgium, England on a weekly basis. So then I got offered a job in packaging innovation in Campina, which is now Friesland Campina, and that was as well completely new because it was end to end. So it was depalletizing as well, fresh bottles. And that time we were looking at fresh milk in PET bottles, and that was multi-layer PET bottles for fresh milk, and also caps or cloches with scavengers, oxygen scavengers. So it was quite end to end, and also the compression of bottles, etc. And then by a certain only less than 2 years that I was there, I got offered a job in England. Of course, that was quite obvious for me to move into England then, and that was in '99. And that was at Coty, back in the cosmetics, back in the personal care, doing a lot of innovations on color cosmetics. So I did quite a bit of work in bullet retention. So I know it is not for males to talk about, but very often they saw me on public transport as well, with even nail varnish just to test the brushes or whatever. I never used lipstick in that sense, but I tested it well out because bullet retention is very important, that the lipstick itself doesn't fall out of the go there, what we call. And although it is looks all quite simple, it is quite interesting from the materials point of view. So the interaction, the gliding, etc., but also the interaction between the different materials. If you have a base and you have a cover, for instance, the friction fit is quite important to have that click. Let's say you can compare that. I compared at that time as well with a door of a car, for instance. If you close a cheap car and you close the door of a Mercedes or a Rolls Royce, that sounds completely different. And that's the same with lipsticks. In fact, if you open and reclose or a compact powder or whatever. So I did quite a bit of work and innovation as well, lubricant-free mechanisms, for instance, and also for the bullet retention, etc. So after Coty, after 3 years, I got a bit bored with developing and innovating lipsticks and compact powders or whatever. I went to Marks and Spencer's, and I was heading up there the beauty department. Marks and Spencer is completely different. So I went from mass market as well, because Coty was as well Rimmel, but also the more sophisticated luxury brands like J.Lo. So I developed as well a lipstick, for instance, for Jennifer Lopez, which was quite interesting. Unfortunately, I never have met her lips or herself.
Okay.
But it was quite interesting to sit in a call where she was in as well. So no pressure there.
No.
So Marks and Spencer, retailer, also a big name in the UK as well, and also abroad at that time. So that was quite interesting. We don't produce, or we didn't produce anything ourselves. You work with subcontractors. You do organize, in fact, yourself. You specify, you guide your subcontractors, in fact, in what type of packaging you have to use. So it's more a coordinating role. And that's where I started as well, a lot with the ethical auditing as well. So you go to to South Korea or to various places in Thailand and Taiwan or China for the auditing of the suppliers to make sure that it is all compliant. So that was quite interesting. And then after Marks and Spencer's, I went again, moved on after 3 years to Cozy, which was a full service supplier, and we were based in the premises of Body Shop in Littlehampton, and we had as well the facility in Maestek in Wales, the old Revlon, and we fulfilled, in fact, from the food service supply point of view, cosmetics and personal care for companies like L'Oreal, like P&G, Unilever, etc. And I was there heading up the innovation part for packaging. Also a lot of innovations. Unfortunately, till they went bankrupt after 2 years, probably financially they didn't do it right, and maybe not in the right time, maybe too ambitious as well, because we were starting in China, we were starting in Poland, etc. And they went in receivership. And then, fortunately enough, some people in Cadbury, that time it was called Cadbury, it's still called Cadbury, but now it is Mondelez. They knew that I was on the market, and I started there first with contract work. And the contracting work was quite interesting, because they were looking for front-face SRP concepts for the Cadbury in the factory in Bourneville near Birmingham, but also moving some products from Somerdale into Poland. And that was before Kraft Foods came on board, because there was quite a bit in the press. So I moved the mini eggs, the milk tray, etc., from a local production, also third party, green and blacks, for instance, to Poland, from the packaging point of view, doing at the same time some innovations, some IPs as well, some patents on some new concepts. So, and I'm there now about 15 years, first in chocolate, and then chocolate innovation, always in packaging, and now I'm global. I'm called a principal scientist, which sounds a lot, but it is cross-category, and it is global, that I'm working in packaging innovations. And the two platforms I'm covering is digital, which is, of course, digital printing, digital cutting, finishes, etc. I introduced as well many years ago, 10 years ago or so, augmented reality, virtual reality, etc., printed electronics, but also the last few years on the fibers. And the fibers is quite interesting, because as you know, in the confectionery we have a lot of flow wraps, so there is flexible papers, which is very important. But those two areas I'm still covering. Of course, I do the proof of principle, and then of course the region, the local brand or the country can take it over, or the category can take it over once I've done the proof of principle. So in digital printing, for instance, we have introduced a lot in digital printing from 2011 onwards. In fact, well, by the way, how I came to printing as well. In Marks and Spencer, I did introduce already the digital printing there, because Marks and Spencer is not the big volumes. But that time when I introduced 20 years ago digital printing, it was too expensive. It was the quality was not yet there and too slow. But we did on the bath products, for instance, all the labels, and that was with Amberley that we worked very flexible, very good coordination and collaboration with those suppliers, and with HP, of course, and that worked really well. So the same at Cadbury, how we started as well. We're doing the Cadbury Gifts Direct. Also, in the meanwhile, they did the Green and Blacks Gifts Direct. But we have done so many activations since, and we still do in digital printing, mainly for personalization and customization, but we're looking as well on speed to market, etc. And it's working well, and it is a good tool, a good technology, in fact, to leverage yourself and to build up a good brand identity.
Yeah, so digital printing, you thanks so much for that, because you've kind of given me a good steer on your experience levels from lipstick to chocolate. So it's and also the role that you play within the business, which is clearly defining new ways of doing things for the entirety of the business. So it's pretty pivotal, isn't it, in terms of how you deploy technology across the supply chain and production methods. So fascinating stuff. You've already hinted, but digital printing technology And obviously I have a bit more of an interest in inkjet, but digital printing technology for you, what is the number one value you think that digital printing technology gives Mondelez?
Flexibility and decomplexity, in fact, both of them. We still know digital printing, because it is slower, it is not a wide web as what we would like to have, let's say, in a flexible world. So it is still a little bit more expensive, it is still slower, but it gives you a lot of flexibility, so you only print what you need. And that is, in fact, the advantage of digital printing. MOQs, in some cases, for some of our products, you might have an MOQ of 300,000 pieces. With the digital print, technically you can only print one. Of course, on real, let's say, for flexible materials, it is a bit more challenging to print just one, but your MOQs are far more or less, you can do 5,000 pieces, while now it is a few 100,000 pieces. So also your lead time can be completely different, as long as you have, of course, the materials in house, but it is quite quick to change over into digital printing. So the flexibility, speed to market, also where currently your product shelf life is still the same, but the time that your product exists or your flavors is getting shorter. So the consumer wants more different flavors to test out. So you can do test markets, you can do sales samples, etc. You can do far more with digital printing. So your flexibility is there. Also, from the decomplexity point of view, you can advance that as well. If you could bring digital printing near to your place where you produce, so in collaboration, of course, with your incumbent suppliers, if they have digital printing, of course, that is an advantage. If they don't have it, they can collaborate as well with their partners, and which we have then partners as well. So that is a decomplexity as well, which is an advantage.
And that's great to hear. And we're using the word digital printing, and Inkjet is part of that. But do you also embrace other forms of digital printing, like electrostatic and so on?
Yeah. So
graphic rather. Yeah.
We have, of course, the major challenge within the confectionery is the compliances. So that is a challenge, and that's why we have used so far only the electro inks, let's say, because these are the compliances. You might say, well, in Inkjet we have as well the compliances. Indeed, there is a lot of Inkjet digital printing which are compliant, and that is water-based. I know a lot of companies, and I have connection with nearly any digital printing company in the world, or it is with ink suppliers, or it is with the engine, the machine suppliers. And the water-based is the compliances. We have to bear in mind most of our products, or any products in the food, they don't have the necessary functional barrier. And a functional barrier is only when you have 7 or 8 micron aluminium, so that no components in the inks or in the varnishes can migrate into the product. Our products, and mainly in the chocolate, is very sensitive in taint. So it picks up quite quickly. In fact, any taint or any active components, even within Campina, for instance, when we did some printing on the sleeves, which is on the outside of your polypropylene bottle, in your chocolate drink, you still could taste, in fact, some components of those inks which migrated through the sleeve, through the bottle, into your product. So we have that as well. Anybody or everybody has that. So compliance is the major challenge. If you're working with digital inkjet printing and you have water-based inks, you have, of course, your curing, which is the importance. So you have your speed as well. So if we are running, for instance, on speeds, let's say on 175 meters a minute, or even when it is slower, let's say 100 meters a minute, which is still fast enough, how can you cure water-based inks? And that is, of course, the challenges, and that is the compliances. Many companies are introducing, let's say, UV is not an option because that is the active components which are in there, the initiators. But even the low migration is for us not acceptable. It needs to be as well. If we're talking about compliances, it is not just migration; it is the set off as well. Because if you work on sheets, if you work on reels, it touches on the inside as well. But what we do as well as a test is the foreseeable use, what we use, what we say, and what we use as a test. Foreseeable use means like you leave a product on a printed surface. If you have, for instance, a Toblerone, which is a triangle shape, you can't leave a product on there technically because it is that shape. But if you have a flat carton, or it is a Cadbury, or it is an Oreo, or whatever, the consumer can leave a product on a printed item, and that tainting, the inks will go into definitely a chocolate, which is more absorbent, let's say, as a product, but also in gum and candy where we have that as well. So that is the challenge, and digital printing in Inkjet has a lot of advantages, even more advantages, I would say, as the electro inks, because the machines are more compact. It is even more flexible. It is a non-contact printing as well. So where I see the future as well, in that case, is like there will be more and more digital inkjet printers in line as well, because you have your flexibility even more, because your decomplexity, and no disrespect, but you can exclude as well in this case your converters in one way or the other, unless you need as well still laminated versions, you still need with cold seal, etc. So we're not going to exclude that immediately, but that is an advantage what digital inkjet had as well. We use Inkjet now for the date coding, and that is just a mono color, let's say. But the challenge is, besides the compliances, is as well the full color gamut. If you would like to take one material, let's say, let's take Milka, for instance. You take one material, you can do your full graphics of the 60 SKUs that we have anytime, so you can switch over from flavor, from different languages, different countries, different products anytime, in a way, just with one material as an inventory. With the digital inkjet, if you would have that in line, you can do that. I know companies, for instance, not in the confectionery, but other companies who have digital printing in-house, which is more flexible, but they have then as well the hybrid version, because your background, your surface finish needs to be printed as well. If you do that all in digital, it will be slow down your process and will be more expensive as well. So the hybrid version is very interesting. So the color gamut is as well a challenge, that you have the full color gamut, unless you go only for start with just the ingredients, let's say, or just do the changes of the flavors, and then you only need maybe a few colors. That is less. Then, of course, the speed is related to your compliances as well of your inks, but also the width is sometimes important as well. If you look on sheets, etc., how wide can it be? And then what you have to bear in mind is as well is the resolution. How good is the resolution as well. Now, currently, if we are running in Flexo or in Roto, overall, we're using a 300 dpi in resolution. You can go higher in digital printing. We know that you can go up to 1200 or you can go in 600, but it is quite important that your small dots in ingredients list, for instance, or your barcodes are still readable in digital as well. So you have to bear that in mind, and definitely if you're going to go in line. And then what is important as well, what has nothing to do with digital printing, is the add-on, is the embellishments. So if we're talking about a digital printing in-house or even with a supplier, who is going to do, if you're talking about cartons, who's going to do the cutting, the creasing, who is going to do the score lines, the gluing, let's say. And if you bring that in-house as well, where you're going to, we are confectioners, we are not printers, so we can't do that in-house, as you know, because that is too challenging. But also the supplier has to think about it as well. Applying varnishes, for instance, if you're thinking about embossing, if you're thinking about hot foil or cold foil, etc. So that is the embellishments which you're gonna need as well, and that is quite important. Last but not least, if you do your own artwork, who is doing the due diligence? Now, currently, our converter has the full responsibility of that the artwork is printed as we have indicated. And that is artwork is including, of course, the ingredients. If you have an ingredient, 15% of a particular ingredient in there, and you forgot a dot, it should be 1.5. So who is doing that checkup as well with the digital printing, if you bring it in house or even if you work with partners? So you have to make sure that you have those due diligence attributes as well incorporated in your supply chain.
Yeah, so I hear from you a lot of excitement about Inkjet, but equally there's quite a lot of problems that perhaps need to be solved first before it plays a bigger role.
I wouldn't call it problems. I wouldn't say. I would say it's challenges. But you have to keep it in mind. In fact, it's not just like okay, we're gonna install it here and it is all done and dusted. No, you have to incorporate it. In fact, in your current supply chain, because it is as well a complete planning change as well. Because digital printing is a different planning as what you currently do, and you have to collaborate as well as a team with your colleagues, or it is procurement, or it is quality, it is regulatory, it is packaging. It's not just packaging, in fact, it is as well product because of the compliances. So it is nice challenges.
Nice challenges. And do you see a future where Inkjet will play a
definitely
bit more of a role? You do?
I wish they would speed up a little bit with their developments, because I remember if I talk on conferences or sit in panels or whatever, everybody or a lot of companies are working on food compliances. But I know food compliances is very slow, because to have a compliant ink, you have to apply for it. It's 18 months, toxi test, etc. So it takes a long time, but I still see that it is a slow-moving process. And what maybe they don't see is like the need in the food industry of those compliances in Inkjet. And then, of course, the integration as well, because print on shape is, for instance, very interesting. You see a lot on rigid packaging, let's say, on bottles and on cans, which is as well with Inkjet. But we would like to see print on shape as well in general on normal products. And we do already printing in store, let's say on Toblerone and other products, but it is very slow, and it is in store. Just the consumer waits for it a few minutes, and they have their sample in hand. But we would like to expand it a little bit more, that you can integrate it as well in your production, and then you have your pack-offs, for instance, already done. You store it in your distribution center, and you can print on shape at late stage. Today you print for Sainsbury's, for instance, tomorrow for Tesco's, or you do, there's a football match or whatever, and you print the day before, and you go to the stadium and hand it out there. So there is a lot of advantages in there, and those opportunities, I think we have to work together with those digital inkjet printers and see how we can evolve that and speed a little bit up with those developments.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned as well converters, and converters are people that produce a lot of the packaging and the printing for Mondelez at the moment. Typically, are they embracing Inkjet, or are they nervous about the Inkjet technology as well, or not nervous, but a little cautious about it?
If I look at a 20-year history, let's say, of digital printing, I remember in conferences that there were converters there. No, we're never going to do that. We're never going to change over. Nobody ever said printing will change over in digital printing. everything will not change into digital printing. It will be more hybrid versions, etc. But what I've seen in those years, a lot of converters have installed digital printing already, or it is electro inks, but also digital inkjet. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to call names, but I know that Fuji is installed here and there. I know Kodak is installed here and there. So there is quite a bit of installment already of digital inkjet printing as well, which is quite interesting. There is a lot of ink suppliers as well in the digital inkjet. Also the parts of the engines as well, which are installed. So it is growing, but as usual, it is a bit slow, in fact, but there is more and more, and a lot of incumbent suppliers, or current converters, they are looking at digital printing. And that is as well the advantages of digital inkjet and as well the electro inks, both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. So from what you're saying, the big challenge is compliance, and it's food or no migration. Low migration isn't good enough. Has to be no migration, water-based preferably. And the other challenge is curing, because obviously, perishables you can't be exposed to heat, really, can they? So curing is the other key challenge. And I'm sure our featureprint partners are busy working on solving these. In fact, I know they are. You obviously were involved in corrugated, folding carton, but equally, I think the key thing here is what you might call flexible packaging, right? Which is the flexible, the kind of thin.
I think the flexible packaging and carton board is the two main ones. Cartons is of course as well important for us because we still have quite a bit of cartons as well. But if I could say it in the top three list, one is flexibles, second is carton board, and then third one is corrugated.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So that's good to establish where you are, and it sounds like you've got a lot of commitment for Inkjet going forward. So we expect to see over time challenges solved and more Inkjet production, which is exciting and good to hear. But we've obviously enduring and still enduring the pandemic. And has this how has this impacted upon you and production and the business generally? Has it changed anything?
As a food company, of course, we kept our productions. Most of the people who didn't have to go into offices or in the factories didn't go and worked from home, like myself. But the production kept going, and we kept as well as much as possible as everybody safe for the employees. So quite a bit of restrictions and limitations of what you can and can't do, and that's where I'm saying I don't need to go into the office, so I didn't go to the office. Our production has been busier than ever as well. I don't know the figures, of course, but like everybody knows as well, the growth in e-commerce, we were already quite big in e-commerce, but that has been growing as well. The challenge what everybody has at the moment is, of course, obtaining the raw materials, or it's not just obtaining the raw materials, but also our packaging is, of course, depending on it. So those packaging suppliers or converters, they are waiting for raw materials. And that is, of course, the challenge for everybody. And that is globally, in fact. That it is not just here in Europe. It is in Latin America, North America. It's in Asia Pacific, or whatever. So I think everybody has the same challenges there in terms of getting the goods in to produce. But we went well through the pandemic. We didn't have any losses. We still a growing company for so many years now. I'm now nearly 15 years there, and every year I see us growing in a way, and that didn't change.
Okay, so that's people are still buying and like the products and want to.
It is. It is a product as well, which leans as well. You want a treat, isn't it? You buy a chocolate, you buy a biscuits or whatever, and that is something what people don't leave. I would think that is my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's emotional, isn't it? It's that kind of emotional purchase. But you said at the beginning you're a scientist, and I know you have a strong interest in well, you also said you could forecast the weather, which is pretty impressive, but you're also very much interested in astronomy and the planets and so on. I see often images you share of the sun.
Yeah.
Well, how's that come about? And that's obviously something you're very interested in. Yeah, and it is interesting, isn't it?
It goes a long way back, and that tells me as well my age, of course. But when I was in the 60s, I followed, of course, all the Apollo flights, the moon landings, etc. So that's how it started. I was interested, and I was quite fascinated about the aerospace as an astronaut or whatever. Not that I didn't want to be an astronaut. So I started to build up my first telescope, grinding the mirrors, etc. So and that's where you learn as well, like how you build your own telescope. Then you know as well how it functions, etc. And you can upgrade yourself. You build your observatory as well. The same thing. Also. Building some cameras together to do some meteor photographing during the night, having them all automated as well. So that's how it's more or less started. And then you do some studies, some courses here and there, and you get some extra qualifications. But I would say like it's with everything in a hobby. If you are interested, for instance, in an automotive industry, are you a builder of cars or rebuilding? Are you a vintage car favorite, or do you do Formula One or whatever? And so I went into more specialized aspects in astronomy as well. So I'm a solar observer. That's why I did as well on the university afterwards the solar physics study as well a couple of years ago, because I want to understand what I was seeing, what I was doing. So I do a lot of solar observations. I work on programs as well. I travel to all solar eclipses. I've seen now, I think, more than 45 solar eclipses everywhere on the North Pole. To mention a few, in December, going to the South Pole, for instance, for the next one. So and I do some work for it, but I say work, it's just for fun for me. I'm not paid for it, and that's the advantage with a hobby. You do it when you want to do it, and you don't do it if you don't want to do it. And that's why I'm living here as well in the Peak District. There's no street lights. There's here and there a garden light. But then I just tell the neighbors, like, I'm watching in your bedroom, so switch your light off. So I'm just teasing them. They know me now here. And that's why I have an observatory here, and it is with a good telescope where it is also automation as well. You just enter the coordinates or what you want to see, and the telescope goes automatically there. I have automatic meteor detection cameras. I have a weather station here. It keeps me busy, and it is, I think, in work you have to find the right balance in what your private life is and what your work is. That is that you can switch off as well, but you still can relate to work as well, because it is the science behind it. It is what you do, that you understand what you're doing. I think that is quite important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And linking it back down to earth in terms of the discussion that we're having here, obviously that, with your awareness of the weather and planets and the sun, sustainability has come through very much in our recent survey as a key driver that may have become an even bigger driver due to the pandemic. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Oh, yeah. Sustainability has always been a priority within the company, but also from a personal point of view. My wife always called me my eco-warrior, because being from Belgium, we had already the segregation of all the different packaging components in Belgium. Here in the UK, we're getting there, but still slowly. Still a lot of doubts and questions about, well, if the collection is segregated, how does it end up? Is it still in landfill? Is it still burnt or whatever? Is it still put together? So it is still not completely right, but that is a general terms. Every country has their own challenges in terms of supply chain or in terms of infrastructure, let's say. But I think looking after our planet and here you mentioned already in the Peak District, walking out here on my footstep here, you walk out and you're already in the nature. Like I mentioned, we don't have any street lights here. Everything is still green and. Of course, that is you have to respect it as well. If you see a lot of tourists here and you see some dirt left behind, some wrappers or whatever, it's not that it makes me angry, but it is frustrating, in fact. But sustainability, and that's why I'm working as well on the other platform within work as well, on the fibers, where it is quite important to educate as well. That sustainability is important, and we as a brand owner, also the retail, have a very important message to the consumer as well. What is the best thing in terms of sustainability? Inkjet or digital printing has as well the advantages. You exclude already the plates, the cylinders or whatever. Also your inks, you use normally less ink than any other printing process as well. So you print only what you need. So the obsolescence, the inventory is reduced as well. So from the sustainability point of view, it fits quite nicely in there as well. And that is quite important. So I think we all have to contribute as well. And how can we reduce in fact, the carbon footprint. I've just hang some posters out in the village as well, like switch your lights off, because if you leave a light on for an hour, for instance, that costs you that much. If you leave the light on during the night in your garden, it costs you that much in a year. But it is also the expression of how much in carbon footprint that it is affecting, in fact. And also the nature has some influences as well. If you leave lights on, for instance, the animals, the plants, etc., has all the negative influence on that.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. So materials, and you mentioned fibers. I assume that's because you're looking into new materials. I'm hearing that people are being challenged, i.e., because retailers and brands are wanting to use different materials that are more sustainable, that challenges technology to print effectively on them, and that's a relatively new thing.
Besides the fibers, of course, there's a lot of materials that we are looking at. We were looking at the supply chain as well. How do we optimize the recycling also in monomaterials? If you look at the wrapper, for instance, the wrapper of a Milka bar or a Cadbury bar is already a monomaterial, let's say, it's BOPP. So, but how can we make sure that the infrastructure is there in the different countries, that working with the retailers as well, how can we collect it? Because the recycling companies are less interested, because we are not the big volume, we are not the big weights, let's say. So it is less financial or economical in their advantage to collect those kind of things. But that's the work all behind the scenes, and we are not the only one. It's many brands, it's many companies who are working together with it. Is also the sorting. We have the Holy Grail, for instance, which is an organization how we can collect as well the packaging material and how it is segregated in different types of materials. That is also from the recycling point of view. So it is not just looking at the materials itself, it's also the supply chain, it's also infrastructure. And by 2025, we should be all, in fact, okay in terms of circularity for the sustainability, and which is quite important. And our challenge is we always set the ladder higher and higher to challenge ourselves. How can we even do better in terms of materials as well?
Yeah, that's good to hear. Good to hear. I'd like to ask, so a curious person, I assume you like reading as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you any books you've read recently? Any books you've read recently you think, oh, that's inspiring? That's worth a read.
I said a careful yeah, because I'm not a novel reader
No.
in that sense. But when I do read books, I just received a book last week, and I'm exploring. That's about solar astronomy, which is not a reading book, but it is more a reference book. But what is interesting in those kind of things is that I look always up. What have I not done yet in that area? And I do that professionally as well. So what are the opportunities to look at? And in solar astronomy as well, I've done a lot of visual work, eclipses. That I always look for something new. For instance, when I went a couple of years ago to Borneo, I tried a different instrument to do observations. And in solar astronomy as well, I've not done yet, let's say, the radio astronomy for solar observing, and that's the same for meteors, etc. So I'm looking into that one now. I'm looking in different aspects as well in terms of occultations, which is timing and measuring, in fact, diameters and shapes of minor planets. So I'm doing that work. So and that's the kind of books I'm reading, if you call it reading, but it is more investigating, in fact, what I can do.
It sounds like you have a very strong commitment to continual learning.
Oh yeah,
continually learning, which is
if you're not
great for what you do. Yeah.
If you're not hungry in life, and hungry, I mean not just eating and drinking or whatever, but and you have to do that as well, by the way. But if you're not hungry and do something differently, life would be boring, isn't it? So you have to make it interesting for yourself, that you do something differently. And that's where I always feel like I'm now in packaging for more than 40, or is now nearly 45 years, getting old now. So if in packaging, it is never boring, because it's always something differently. It's always something growing. If it is in terms of processes, in technology, is in materials, etc., there's always something differently and new to learn about, and that is in private life as well. So you have to make it interesting for yourself, and otherwise you get stuck. In fact, isn't it?
Yeah, you get stuck and you stop growing, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of, you've already answered it in a way, really. Just last question rather, is what would be one piece of advice you give to someone who's looking to join print and packaging industry?
I think be hungry and be passionate about it. I think that is. Don't lose your passion. Be enthusiastic as well, and never say it is a problem, whatever. It is a challenge, and you have to face the challenges as well. It is not always easy, and sometimes you have to step back. It's 3 steps forward, maybe 2 backwards, but at least keep progressing yourself and make it interesting for yourself. So be hungry. I think I would say that is very interesting.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Patrick. That was a really interesting discussion, a very sort of broad-ranging amount of experience you've had in the industry, and also still playing a very leading role with Mondelez as well in terms of the the future of packaging, in essence. So we really appreciate you joining us. I'm sure people really enjoy this discussion, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you in person at a future event. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you for having me. And if people want to reach out to me, my door is always open.
Super. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.